Mabuga. How so mood? That's Garifuna, by the way. I hope you all had a good lunch and you enjoyed. If you notice I'm being a little bit different, in my country, they would say something to me like, "Galaga chigas." And that simply means I can't really keep still, so I can't really just stand behind the podium. So I hope you guys are okay with that. First of all, on behalf of the Belize team, I'd like to say thank you guys so very much to the SEMCARD team, to the organizers, to the facilitators, to the mentors, most especially my dear mentor, our dear mentor over there, Senor Hugo. Muchas gracias. Oh my goodness, I am OMG, like they would say. Where's the real Hugo?
Thank you.
Ruben, I'm sorry. But you guys know, if you all weren't here, if we weren't here, this would have been fun now. So I have to say thank you to everyone who's here as well. And we have to give ourselves a hand for being here. Well, as you can see, exploring a different reality. This is what Belize is all about. Word limits is not in our language. So I'm going to teach you one of the many languages that we speak in Belize. So I'd like you to repeat. This is what you call it, the Garifuna call and answer. Mabuga. Oh, excellent. You guys are fast learners. Alright, so I'm going to go into our presentation now. On all that we have learned in this week at this academy. It's been a real great learning experience, and ours will be a little bit different in that what will happen is that we came here thinking that we had one particular problem, but after discussing with the team, after we bounced ideas off of each other, after we stayed up nights in the lobby doing work, they said I forced them to, but that's not true. And meeting with our dear mentor, Ruben, I got it right this time. So we're going to move on now to Belize and our solution strategy and action plan, yes? So this is our original problem. If you guys recall on Monday when I did our presentation, what we came here with was the whole issue of compensation. Really a compensation framework, because we're not only looking at salary and benefits, we're not only looking at trying to get higher pay, although of course I wouldn't mind getting more pay, but that's another matter. So the whole issue of the compensation framework and how it has affected the SOEs in our country, the parastatal agencies like mine, where you have to settle for less qualified individuals, we have high staff turnover, because people seek other places where they can get a better salary package. So now this is our redefined problem, which is the compensation framework, and the issues that we have there is really as a result of a lack of a governance structure. And so now when we resolve that, then we can move on to the issue of compensation, poor communication, and other issues that we have. So now key lessons learned throughout these past 4-5 days. We have the governance models, which Ruben had spoken to in terms of what is the decentralized, centralized, a dual model, what you might decide that best suits your situation. And of course, when it comes to managing political impact, which as we have all realized, it cuts across the board here. No one has been immune to this disease, if I may say so. The issue of our boards of directors and ensuring that we have strong boards, especially as it relates to the composition of the board, and ensuring that certain individuals have key capacities, key skills that that's needed to make for a really strong board. When it comes to fiscal risk analysis, I must say I am sorry I wasn't able to sit in on those sessions, but we were able to split up into groups, and my dear colleagues over there, Orlando and Zita, they shared their experiences in those sessions that they had. And so this is what they shared with us as it relates to the fiscal risk analysis in terms of unrecorded liabilities, when you have unfunded pension schemes, the solvency of your different agencies, that these are issues that you have to deal with. Non-financial benefits, I must say thanks to, where's my colleague? One of my colleagues, that gentleman over there in the long sleeve blue shirt, he brought up the issue of it's not all about money, and we realize that it's not just about money, it's about your other benefits in addition to the dinero, like we say. So when it comes to other benefits, these are just 3 examples that we came up with. For example, time in lieu of pay, certain travel benefits. For example, we are here right now. When you travel over the weekend, you might get back your days when you will get back days when you get back, because this is all for work. We're not here for fun. I'll just travel later. I'm looking forward to it. As a colleague of mine was saying, you do business travel, but then it always ends up being business slash, right? Okay, and then we have health insurance and other benefits. Now when it comes to useful examples in the region, we looked at Jamaica. We spoke to our colleagues from Jamaica. We spoke to Jim from Australia. We really loved his presentation and all that he presented in terms of the reform that they have gone through in Australia. We spoke to our colleagues from Seychelles. And what we found in common was that they all commenced reform because of certain, what would be the word, a scandal maybe? Some sort of crisis that initiated the reform. So now what are we trying to do in Belize? We're trying to preempt this crisis. And how are we going to do that? The solution strategy that we have come up with, this is just a few amongst many that of course we'd have to end up doing. We have setting up an oversight body for all the SOEs, especially for example as was done in Australia, and grouping and classifying their SOEs. The important point that SOE should adopt a good governance mechanism, especially when it comes to standardizing the reporting mechanism, their KPIs, financial and non-financial, which is super important. And of course, to accomplish all of this, you need legislative reform. So in terms of legislative reform, we're recommending that a revision of all our SOE acts, of course, strengthening the boards, and of course, key is the limiting of political interference. Now our action plan, we came up with a main objective, which is the having efficient, effective, and sustainable SOEs. And why? Because how much longer can we have our agencies sucking at the government teeth, right? At some point, they're going to have to grow up and get on their own. So now we have to initiate this process, and the first step in that is the initiation of the SOE reform process. And that burden will fall on this team that is right here today that you see in front of you. Because when we get back to Belize, we will have to report on what we have learned here, on what we now propose to be done from here. So there will have to be follow-up. So that is the first step in initiating the process. Then we have our next objective as being that of establishing OECD governance structures for all our SOEs. And of course, then we have different actions that will take place. And I must clarify that the only one action that we were able to put a time frame deadline on is as it relates to what we have control over. We have control over that. When we get home, we can make an appointment with, I thought, I have to give you guys this little anecdote here. Yesterday, I overheard some colleagues talking about big hitters, and I thought they were discussing baseball. It turned out that they weren't. We will have to meet with the big hitters when we get back, so that we can control, so that we can put a time frame on. The other things we can really put a time frame on because that's above our salary scale. So then they will deal with that, and then we also have that overarching issue that some of the previous presenters already mentioned as it comes to elections. No election date has been set, but elections are probably in the next year and a half, 2 years possibly. Yeah. It's fast approaching. So we're pretty sure that they will be calling early elections. So many of these actions will have to be delayed. Of course, we're going to adopting best practices, establishing a regulatory framework, and of course, these will be our different deliverables when it comes to the different actions that will take place in order to accomplish these objectives. Other important considerations to ensure implementation. Well, we don't have many, as we say, for the onset, because we don't have control over much right now. But first of all is to meet with, of course, this huge heavy hitter, who's the financial secretary in our country, and we will meet with him. I think first person to meet with him will probably be Zita, because you work closely with him, do you not? So Zita will initiate that process for us, and she will bring us in, I'm sure. And of course, key is to get anything done, you always need dinero. So we're going to have to submit a proposal in terms of obtaining funding to accomplish all that we're currently proposing. And so, my presentation ends there, and I would like my team to start off with what we have up there. I'd like to say, Sarah May.
Gracias. Thank you.
Thank you all so very much. Merci beaucoup. Now I'd like to open the floor to any questions if you may, and I'll be gracious enough to allow the team over there to respond. I will stand aside.
Thank you very much for this very good presentation. It looks like we're starting to have a community of practice on how to best implement an oversight entity. So I think we already had some good thoughts on that before, and maybe you can follow up with your colleagues that have similar issues and help yourselves going forward, exchanging experiences, how the implementation goes. So,
any questions? One question? Two questions? You guys are good?
Hello? Just a clarification. You mentioned with regards to your timeline that you put in June. So when you go back, so you're going to initiate some SOE reform process. But you also mentioned that you didn't put any timeline or probably didn't identify other areas that you have no control of. Those areas you have no control over, how that impact your assessment of SOEs?
Well, it will be the main impact because the objective is to get the SOEs in line and in some form of structure. And if we don't have the buy-in, it won't happen. The whole issue of the election plays a critical role because this will be a major change in the country. That you'll have some people who love it, some people who hate it, and I'm sure that the government will not want that to be an issue leading up to election. So while it may be a good idea behind closed doors after we meet with the financial secretary, it won't go beyond there. I don't even think they'll bring it up to cabinet until they have the new administration in place.
Will that be all? By the way, I have one clarification. When we were introduced as Team Belize. I'd like to say that you have to be careful with that term because we have a country that's currently laying claim to us, Spanish-speaking country, so we don't really like to be called Belize, it's Belize.
thank you, Belize. Thank you.
It's a pleasure standing here this afternoon representing my lovely island, Dominica. Many people do not know Dominica because they tend to believe that's the Dominican Republic. But Dominica is located between the twin French islands of Martinique and Guadeloupe. It's a small island of about 70,000 people. Okay. And because of that, we do not have many SOEs, just about 10 that are revenue earning and about 5 statutory bodies. Okay, we are going to present our solution, our action plan and strategy solution. We will not deviate too much from our main problem, which is mainly financial, and political interference was one of the popular problems faced by almost every country. So undue political influence over the operation of SOEs is one of our main problems, which as a result, it affects the financing or revenue generating in the SOEs. So inadequate financing to support operations and capital expenditures. The key lessons learned is to sensitize stakeholders about the operating realities of SOEs. Identify pockets of power and form an alliance. SOEs cannot operate in isolation. They have to have a communication between the government and all stakeholders. We have to understand this socio-political reality. We live in a time where politicians are influenced by the populace. And based on the demands of the people, they tend to move their programs towards the people. So, and there tend to be sort of a culture that is created where the people tend to feel that the government owes them everything, or maybe us, everything. So because of that, it's kind of difficult to get the people to realize the need for change in order to bring development. We also have to ensure that there's a flow of information and open line communication between stakeholders in order for us to make the necessary changes or take the necessary decision. And we look at the example of our mentor, which he spoke about, the Medellin EPM experience. And we noticed that the mayor used his influence to, maybe in his campaign also, and he tried to get the rates of the utility service to be reduced, hoping that that would, maybe he would gain popularity, but the people did not buy into that. Instead, they realized in order to get the best service, they have to pay for it. Nothing comes for free. And they were willing to pay maybe more, because sometimes an increase in a fee could enable the service providers to provide you with the best quality. So we're not looking at price, but instead we want to look at quality and sustainability. Our solution strategy is to set up a campaign to sensitize the public about the existing and potential challenges and the proposed resolution strategy. As we heard throughout the week, there are many challenges faced by SOEs. And as I say, we enjoy services, but we never understand the level of challenges that the service providers face in order to bring forth these services. And we really have to win the confidence of the people. And that strategy has to be comprehensive. It's not all about going out and talk to the people, but instead we have to really lay the cards on the table and see where we all can benefit, ensure that it's a win-win solution. And the desired outcome would be greater pricing power and increased revenue eventually. Once you win that, you get the confidence of the people and make them buy in that resolution, that strategy, then it will be easy to initiate that increase. And as we know, in Dominica, our main problem is financial. So that is why we stuck to that trend. And that's our action plan, is to secure the support of the board and line ministries sometimes they are not aware of the financial constraints, although they, for instance, the ministry might say, okay, we will, or maybe, okay, I'm from the Ministry of Finance, I'm just saying that we might say we will guarantee a loan in order for you to undertake a certain project. But you cannot just go ahead and contract a loan to undertake a project without doing a thorough analysis. And you would have to know the financial position of that SOE to know whether that SOE is able to service the loan, because in the event that you default, it falls back on the government. And with that financial model that was introduced, this is something that we would like to undertake, to be able to have the SOEs present the necessary information, especially the financial statements, where we could look at the trends, and maybe from that we'll be able to finalize our plans and implement it. Also, prepare and present proposal outlining plans and intended results. That would be basically for the line ministries as well, and the boards. Then we have public sensitization. After we have gone from that step, we would take it to the public that's of our plans, and maybe have gain the public support. This will be an ongoing thing, because it's not something that you could do in a week or you know. Also, I need to mention that we have 1 month for the first point, but really 1 month might be too ambitious. So we have to revisit our time frame. And my last point is to increase, basically it's increase revenue, which will come through revised billing. And we were thinking of the billing as doing it in an incremental way, that the people will not feel that squeeze from the onset, but it will be a gradual process. So there may be less resistance, and that will be done by the SOEs, of course. And we expect to maintain or improve the quality of service. Other important consideration to ensure implementation: we would report on the lessons learned while at the workshop in our context, in Dominica context, to the Ministry of Finance and the SOEs and management and board. Inclusion of the strategy, implementation in the performance targets of SOE management and other relevant parties. And we could also conduct workshops which we could impart the knowledge that we have attained here. So this could help as well. And that will make them realize the importance of producing the information that we would need to move forward. Because sometimes we may just ignore reporting, but reporting is very important, because based on the information gathered, it will help in the decision-making process. And define and measurable action plans, milestones, and end results. That's it. Okay, I would like to say thank you to Ruben for his assistance.
Thank you very much for this very interesting presentation that shows a very different light on the issue than any of the other countries so far has done. But I think it will also be very useful for them to look at how to put the political interference lessons learned from this week in place. So thank you for that. Are there any comments, any reactions to the action plan from Dominica? Anyone from Obesity wants to say something? No? No comments?
Okay. Well, thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Let us, from the offset, be thankful to Hugo, who, without his efforts, of course, we wouldn't be standing here today. Our presentation would probably be impossible. So we want to extend our full thanks to Hugo. Of course, Of course, our team has remained unchanged since our last presentation. So, of course, to identify our key problem again, it goes from our first presentation, the lack of recognition by SOEs, we say, of the parastatal monitoring department, which, of course, depicts a functional relationship. So it's not only of ignoring or not being aware of the parastatal monitoring department, but of course the parastatal monitoring function. The parastatal entities, of course, demonstrate in such a way that they do not fully comply with the legal reporting and auditing requirements. Like we said the last time, we have established legislation that govern each of them, but sometimes I suspect because of the lack of the input from the line ministries and the line minister, that they sometimes negligent in preparation of what is required of them. Even when they produce the financial information, that information is way out of date or most probably incomplete, that we have to go back to them on many occasions to get the true picture. In fact, many of them do not have audited financial statements. This week we actually had a budget debate in our House of Parliament, and before we left the island last week, the Prime Minister, who is our minister, required that we produce a simple document just giving an up-to-date picture of how many of these organizations have prepared audited financial statements. And he said that he would actually call them by name in Parliament. Key lessons we have learned: benchmarking performance with the private sector or with previous performance. In some instances it might be difficult to mark a certain private SOE with a private sector organization. But we're saying if that is not possible, then we can probably create a trend analysis where you benchmark from what has been happening in previous years. Composition and functioning of boards should be on an objective basis. And of course, we have had workshops in St. Lucia with boards of directors where we have tried to ask them in a nice way to put off this old boys club. Most times the directors are really from what we call the old boys club, You supported me, so I will support you, and the reward is to put you in a board. Input of oversight organization in selection of directors. And actually we have commenced what we call a register of directors, where we not only write their names in, but their qualifications. So we could advise line ministers or the Prime Minister on future composition of boards. And of course what we found out, some of these directors have no qualifications whatsoever. Standardization of information received from SOEs to ensure reliability. Of course, we have developed a parastatal monitoring framework, and of course it might probably need tweaking a little, but the application is across the board. So whether you are a big SOE with debt or with revenue, or a small SOE, we give the same parastatal monitoring, we apply the same parastatal monitoring framework. And it is really a list of questions that we require from the SOEs that we could at least populate our database. At present, we utilize the decentralized model, but of course, this model is workable, but it requires the establishment of a centralized monitoring unit or agency. You know, probably as we have in the case of Chile. We do not want to put away the role of the line ministries, but to really emphasize the monitoring function within a centralized unit. This unit, of course, should table an annual narrative report with specific recommendations on the state of all SOEs in Parliament. We do prepare an annual report, but of course with 82 parastatal organizations, we cannot study each and every one on an annual basis. So on an annual basis, we try to look into deeply the affairs of about 5, 6, 7 of them. But notwithstanding, in fact, that was a request from the Prime Minister also, that we prepare a summarized version, not excluding any of the parastatals. So if we have 10, 20, 30, 40 of them that gives us no information, then we put in our report, no information. Yeah? Useful examples in the region. Of course, we learned quite a bit from Jamaica and Trinidad. And not only upon arriving here, but we have been studying through the internet what these different islands have been doing. And I must say that we have capitalized on the Jamaican model. So we have gone ahead and drafted what we call a Parastatal Monitoring and Accountability Act, which was really based on the Jamaican model. What we have probably added to that act is a section dealing with the Parastatal Monitoring Department. Although we need, of course, legal advice, because I think it is sometimes difficult to trap a department in the legislation in law, because we want to give the Prime Minister a full hand. You know, if he does not want to have the department, then probably the functions can return as in previous years to the Ministry of Finance. The Chile model, of course, a centralized model with some decentralization through SEP. We think that is very good. For instance, you know, the directions from the line ministries, like we said, we do not want to avoid, but probably we can filter it through the Parastatal Monitoring Department, at least going closer to the Chilean model. Solution strategy. Of course, the objectives of our solution strategy is, of course, to deal with the problem we had identified, and that is to increase recognition by SOEs of the parastatal monitoring function. First thing we thought is that we must have this owner's statement of intent, and that is a short-term measure. And like the Prime Minister, well, he have actually told us, I am your minister, and use me at any time you want to. So since he gave us that legal nod that he's going to be naming them by names in the Parliament this week, we think it is best that, and you will see that in our action plan just now, that he actually make an all-encompassing statement, whether he get for particular organizations or a general approach. Secondly, to draft policy, which we think is a medium-term measure, and that policy should take into account the authority of the Parastatal Monitoring Department, the financial information that is being presented, and of course, considering both internal and external auditor issues, operational information regarding governance, timing of reporting. Like we said, you know, it's pointless to give us some report that is way out of sync with current years. Disregard or non-compliance of the financial legislation. And we have quite a bit. Apart from the Finance Administration Act, you know, we have the Procurement and Stores Regulations, and we have their own enabling legislation, where we would hope that there is some high level of compliance, of course, after the intervention of Parastatal Monitoring Department. Develop and implement legislation, a medium to long-term strategy, of course, and this is almost been forced upon us. Pressures from the international bodies, World Bank and IMF, dictate that, of course, we implement best practices. And, of course, it really cannot remain as it is. So we are forced to take on board best practices, benchmarking, and all these sort of things. Proliferation of SOEs and impact on national resources. I think every year or two we get an increase in parastatals. And of course this brings to bear pressure on our national resources. Like we say, you know, what we can put in health, what we can put in education, you know, that goes to paying off some debt. For instance, you know, we have a new general hospital. It was built from a European Union grant to the tune of some $30 million. We have our old Victoria Hospital that costs on average about $20 million to run annually. And that new hospital is about what? 5 times the size of Victoria Hospital. So you could imagine multiply the 20 by 5. But I think the intention is to run it as a statutory or some level of PPP, because we really do not have the money, not even to commence the operations. And finally, to strengthen the operational structure. That is with regard to monitoring and evaluation. And that operational structure we're talking about is the structure within the parastatal monitoring department. And not only for monitoring and evaluation, because oftentimes, you know, the SOEs, they laugh at us. Quite softly, of course, not for us to hear. Because they say, you cannot sanction me, you have no penalties, you're like a toothless tiger. So when you request information, I say, well, I'll take my cool time and I'll give it to you next week or whatever. So we want to strengthen it in that regard, that we could actually apply sanctions and penalties for non-compliance. And there goes our action plan. The objective, of course, on different levels. The first action, the objective of that is to control and monitor and monitoring of SOEs. The action is a statement of government's intention, almost immediately. So when we go back, we're going to try and impress upon the Minister for Finance, who is also the Prime Minister, of the need for making that public statement almost immediately. In fact, we had a little publicity before we came here through our government information service. We let out some news. Of course, we are dual language people. So both in English and in the Creole language, we let them know that we are going to Jamaica to attend this SOE. And of course, when we are back, we will have a press conference, so to speak, with the full team, letting them know what we learned and letting them know we are on board, we are coming. The second objective, to increase awareness of the parastatal monitoring function, which we identified as our key problem. So for that, again, thanks to Hugo, we realized that we can draft a policy, and once it is approved, then of course that would give legitimate reason for our actions. And of course, in the medium term, almost immediately from September, that would be done by the parastatal monitoring unit and approved, hopefully, by cabinet. Once we have the support of our minister, it will definitely be approved. Improve governance practices. For that, we need to draft and approve legislation. And I must say that we have actually commenced work on that drafting of the legislation, like we said, from the Jamaican model. That is a bit more medium to long term. And of course, it would require assistance from Ministry of Legal Affairs, because in any enactment or drafting of any laws, that is almost a rule in St. Lucia that it has to go through the Ministry of Legal Affairs. And of course, the deliverable or output, we hope, is efficient delivery of public goods. And of course, it is two-pronged. So apart from efficient delivery of public goods and services, we have reduced fiscal risk. So it's not just the governance and what you actually do, but of course how you deal with the financial resources entrusted to you. And finally, to strengthen the PMD, that would require a memo to cabinet. And we do not want to complete all these activities before we start strengthening, because we are already existing, and I could tell you, under much pressure, because basically you have 2 technical staff in that department. So the Cabinet of Ministers would have to review our memo and hope, of course, we supported again by our minister, and of course that would lead to efficient and effective PMD. Other important considerations to ensure implementation: we have to be considerate of the socio-political environment. I don't think we care too much about changing government, eh? It doesn't matter which one. Availability of resources, and of course, the easiest way to secure those resources is to have a champion driver. And of course, we have identified that champion driver. He said, use me anytime you want. That is the Prime Minister. Support of the Ministry of Finance. I think it would be impossible for us to achieve all this without the support of the Ministry of Finance. And I think we have had them on board from day one. Thanks to our 2 representatives, right? Mr. Tessa Felicien, Mr. Matthew Branford. And they're very serious about that, you know. If we don't go after the parastatals, they go after them themselves. And I think he learned some fiscal risk techniques, yeah? We're going to apply immediately, right? Resistance from some big SOEs. And we have realized, let me tell you, one of the biggest SOEs, the National Insurance Corporation, billions of dollars in assets, and they work with us hand in hand. You have some other SOEs like St. Lucia ANC Ports Authority, WASCO, SLDB. They give us a little trouble. But I must say, over the last week, when we had that task from the Prime Minister, everybody's calling Mr. Ditterville. I'm going to email you my finance, I'm going to email you. And they start cooperating. They say, well, your name might be called. Definitely, a cost-benefit analysis would be important because we think that the benefits will far outweigh the cost. So even in restructuring our department, if we ask for 2 parastatal monitoring officers, we think we would probably be asking it in good faith because the benefits will definitely outweigh the cost. And of course, the alternatives to implementation, we would definitely let the policymakers know when better cannot be done, we'll have to continue. Yeah? And thank you very much for your attention. I suspect that was so clear we would not get any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Any comments, questions?
I don't think so.
I want to share. I know Hugo, if you want to say something. No? Okay.
Hugo is with us.
So it was a challenge presenting after lunch. Ethnic fatigue. I tried to make the presentation succinct. Okay, our colleague from the Ministry of Finance presented earlier and indicated that the key problem was inadequate reporting. And before I develop on that, I just want to say that when we refer to SOEs, we're referring to the statutory corporations that are 100% owned by the government and the statutory boards and authorities. It does not include the other government institutions that are partially owned. We have 10 of those SOEs. Now the problem identified was inadequate reporting. And the Ministry of Finance indicating that we were tardy with our reporting. The quality of our reporting was very poor, and that is as a result of incompetent accounts personnel and financial constraints to hire those persons. They've indicated that we failed to provide our board minutes and our business plans, and there was an absence of audited financial statements. At the moment, we only have 3 of the statutory corporations out of 10 presenting up-to-date audited financial statements. I just want to say that my organization is one of the 3, Ports Authority. Okay, useful examples in the region. And I'm going to just go through them briefly because they were mentioned before. We have Jamaica, They have the reporting requirement enshrined in their law, and they enforce their sanctions. Trinidad do not have any laws, however, they have an operating manual, and this manual has procedures and reporting templates in them, and that is what the SOEs use to report to the Ministry of Finance. They do not have any sanctions, but they rely on good communications and good networking with those sanitary corporations to get the information. Australia was an interesting one for me because our organization is one of the organizations who refused to provide board minutes. And we supported what Australia is doing. We support their view that the minutes is for board and management and it's not for the Ministry of Finance. The key lessons learned, that we need to strengthen the relationship between the Ministry of Finance and the SOEs. Before Gary and the World Bank team came to St. Kitts, I did not know who my representative was, and that's Cremoy. I knew his voice, and I knew his email address, but I did not know him. And St. Kitts only has like 40,000 people? Yeah, 47, and it's 47,000 people. And we're just about 5 minutes away in terms of distance, and I did not know him. So that tells you that the relationship that we have was not the best. So we learned that we need to strengthen our relationship. We also learned that communication was important, because what was happening is that the ministry would send requests to us, and the sanitary corporations in particular felt that we were responsible to our line ministry and not the Ministry of Finance particularly, and so we did ignore some of their requests. At the same time, the Ministry of Finance too ignored some of ours. They were not very timely in getting back to us, so we had a little bit of a talk of what's going on. So the relationship was not good, and I just want to thank the World Bank team and Gary for, you know, helping us to recognize that it's very important. Another lesson learned is that we need to enforce the sanctions, the Ministry of Finance. The legislation is there, the sanctions are recorded in the legislation, however, it is not enforced. And if you don't enforce something, we're just not going to comply. We also learned, well, the SOEs in particular has developed a greater appreciation of the role of the Ministry of Finance. And I want to say, when we leave here today, we're going to be more cooperative and we're going to provide the relevant information to the Ministry of Finance, except the board minutes. Our solution strategy. We felt that there was a need to have education and awareness sessions for the line ministers, the permanent secretaries, the board of directors, and management, in particular, the general manager and finance department. We also felt too that the time now was ripe because we have a new administration in place. We had a new government started February 2015. The ministers are all very new. They have not been in the public sector before. They're all private persons, and they recognize the importance of reporting. So we feel that the time now is right to really, you know, have consultations with them and have meetings with them and to let them understand the reporting requirements to the Ministry of Finance. Another interesting thing too is that our current finance minister is also the prime minister, and he's an accountant. So the mere fact that he is an accountant means that he understands what it means to have reports and to, you know, comply with the Finance Act and so on. So we believe that he's going to be our champion, and he's going to ensure that that is done. And another strategy too is ongoing communication. As I've indicated from these sessions, our communication has improved dramatically, and we're going to ensure that it is ongoing, it is cordial, we're not going to fight, and then we're going to have the training sessions when necessary. And critical is enforcement. Because if you tell us to do something and we're not doing it and you're not doing anything about it, we're just going to ignore you. So, enforcement. Our action plan. As I said before, our SMART objectives, we're going to educate, on the reporting requirements. And that is going to be on a minister level with the permanent secretary. Then we're going to do it on the board level with all the directors and chairmen and so on. And then on the management level. And on the management level, if there's a need to train in the use of the template as to how to populate it, we're going to do that. And that should be done in 30 days. It's not supposed to take more than that. And the party responsible would be the Ministry of Finance. And out of that, we expect for the relevant parties there to be aware, to own it, and to tie it also in the key performance indicators for management and also the board. So you tie it in, and you use that to evaluate them as well. And then, of course, we hope to get the reports. We also want to resolve the legacy issues, because this is one of the problems why we're not having audited financial statements. We have some financial transactions and issues between the agencies that needs to be resolved. And it requires the intervention and the assistance of the Ministry of Finance to get them resolved. So we're hoping that we can identify all those issues, document them, and propose the relevant solutions, and to meet with the SOEs, the ministries responsible, and the Ministry of Finance to resolve those issues. Once those issues are resolved, we expect that about 6 of the 10 would have audited financials, because the financials are draft audited, but those issues are material to the financial statement, and they're just hanging there. So with the assistance of the Ministry of Finance, we hope to get those done within 3 to 6 months. Enforcement, again, that is critical. If we're not complying, the Ministry of Finance needs to enforce. So if we have a situation with one of the entities not complying, then we're going to send the warning letters within the 15 days. And then after that, based on the act, in 30 days' time, we're going to send it to the Ministry of Finance, the Minister of Finance. And then he will take the relevant action. And the next thing is to strengthen the provision in the act. At the moment, the act says that you do the warnings, then you send it to the Ministry of Finance for action. But it doesn't really say what the minister is going to do. So we're hoping that we can amend the act to indicate that it should be sent to the Attorney General, so the Attorney General can take the relevant actions from there. And that should be done within a year. Other important considerations. The Ministry of Finance has indicated that they are willing to provide the necessary assistance to have a qualified personnel or a firm in some of the organization who has financial records that are not up to date. We only have a few, maybe two institutions, I believe. And they've indicated that they're going to provide that assistance, so we hoped that that would, put them in a position where they could have audited financials soonest. We also felt that there was a need to develop an action plan for 3 of our statutory corporations, in particular those land development corporations. They were created to be in existence for just a period of time to do development of lands, but they have been existing now for almost time immemorial. And they're basically doing maintenance and so on, so the business model has kind of changed and they're not sustainable. So the ministry has to look at those organizations and determine whether or not they need to change their business model, whether or not they need to merge with some other related statutory corporation, or if they need to dissolve the business and transfer that small piece of business that they're doing, that activity like landscaping and so on, to a government department. So those are little issues that we need to work out. Thank you. Succinct, as I said. Any questions? Oops.
It's a concern that I have, and thank you guys very much. You did very well. And perhaps it is not direct. The concern is not maybe direct to you, but I'm happy that you guys brought it up in your presentation, maybe to the facilitators, and particularly our mentor from Australia. It relates to the issue of availability or accessibility to board minutes. Is it a question of best practice, or is it a question of what is legal? I'm speaking in terms of the Ministry of Finance or the PMD in our case, or other oversight bodies are established to do an oversight function. which is like an auditing function. And they represent the owners. They are the owners. When the auditors perform their audit, they have access to board minutes. And it is difficult for me to reconcile that the owners themselves are not privy to the board minutes, whereas the auditors are. I just needed some clarification or feedback on that. Is it a question which is, what is legal? Is it best practice? Because at the end of the day, it's what we're reading here.
In St. Kitts, the requirement to provide board minutes is in law, in the Finance Act. But we feel that what's in the board minutes is really unique to what's happening in the day-to-day operations of the organization, and we don't think that the Ministry of Finance should be caught up in what's happening in our board minutes in particular. We're going to send the quarterly reports, whatever monthly management reports that they need, but in terms of detail of what is discussed in the boardroom, a lot of which has to do with some operational type issues that they don't need to be bogged down with that. That is just our position. I don't know if Australia is here and if they could shed some light.
Yeah. Just 1 second, I just want to be clear. Did you say that the law requires that you submit it? So you're saying that you're not compliant to the law?
The Ministry of Finance is going to work with us to address this issue. Yes. Yes, we're saying that.
I just want to ask a little question, especially the slide before. So you have 3 SOEs doing the same value, and why is that?
They had different purpose. You have one responsible for the cruise area, the cruise port development, and stores and so on, developing that area. You have another one in a different area of St. Kitts, Frigate Bay development. What's the other one? And we have Whitegate. That's different sections of St. Kitts and their special development models. So they created different entity for those development rather than one.
But I still want to advise, in light of scarce resources, a small country of 40,000 people, one SEO can go out.
Right, that's why we're suggesting that they look at those organizations and see whether there's a need to merge or dissolve. Oh yes, and Australia?
Thanks. Yeah, our issue with the board minutes is, I guess, twofold. We want to maintain a separation between the role of the board and the role of the oversight agency. So the question is, if the oversight agency got the minutes, what would they actually do with that information? Are they going to second-guess information, second-guess decisions that the board's already made? Are they going to tell ministers boards have made these decisions? Are they going to agree with them? So we wanted to maintain that strict separation. Okay, yeah, 2. And the second thing is the kind of the feedback loop that might create for the board. So if they know that their decisions are being vetted by the ownership agency, how might that affect, one, the decisions that they make, and secondly, what they might put in their minutes. So I guess for those reasons, we have just a strict policy that they not come to the ownership agency, but I don't think there's anything in the law. Having said that, a lot of our private sector board members would be very, very, very uncomfortable if they thought the minutes would go to the ownership agency.
There is one aspect that perhaps he didn't sorry, I'm saying that there's one aspect that perhaps Jim didn't comment on. Well, first of all, I have the difficulty reconciling why would board members, or as a board member, as the chairman of the board, why would I have difficulty with the owners of the organization that I represent having access to the board minutes and board decisions? I don't have difficulty in reconciling that, but I'm asking the question particularly as it relates to organizations where there have not been any audits for a number of years. And so there is that need for the owners or for the oversight body to really have an understanding of what is going on there. You may hear things from the radio, you may hear things from the public, but then yet the body is saying, well, no, but you do not have access to my board minutes. That, to me, something is amiss here.
On your first point, the reason they have a concern is not particularly what's in the minutes, but the fact that we would want them suggest that we don't respect their autonomy. So it's I guess more a symbolic thing that we have told them that they're an autonomous body and that they are responsible for implementing strategy. And so I think the fact that we would then be asking them for minutes kind of says that we're going to do something with it. In terms of using them to get information, well, I don't think it limits our access to information, we just don't get it through that mechanism. So we have other mechanisms to get the ownership information that we need, and that is more, the structured processes of meeting between the chairman and the minister, meeting between the CEO and the ownership unit. So I don't think we're hampered in terms of a lack of information. It's just we've tried to make that process formal and structured. Because if it goes to the ownership unit, that's not just the minister. That's public servants at quite a low level who are kind of looking at all this.
That was our issue.
Yeah.
You either perform oversight or you don't. That's what I'm thinking. So, you might be. If you have somebody who's at a lower level, that person have considered oversight function.
Our minutes go to the Prime Minister, who is actually Minister of Finance, and the Minister of Finance has oversight over the ministry who is responsible for the SOE. So if he feels that they need to get information, he can pass it on to them. But for us to give the minutes to a representative, for instance, who is a low-level staff, we feel that information is a little bit confidential. That's just our position. And in our case, we're not one of those organizations that is not compliant. We have been complying with everything except the provision of the minutes. So they do have the audited financials, they get the quarterly reports. In fact, as she would tell you, that we are one of the better performing statutory bodies.
Can I add something?
Yes.
Hi. I just want to add something. Having spent a very nice week with you in St. Kitts and learning a lot about the country and about what you're doing, I think the real issue is the lack of communication between the companies and the unit, and within the government as well, between different layers of the government and the unit. And if that were improved, I think there would be less of a need to try to get other kinds of information like board minutes and other things to feed the need for information. And I think that would be much better, because if you actually can have a dialogue on an ongoing basis with people, you're going to learn more than what's in the minutes, because you don't really know how well the minutes reflect what really happened, what was in the minutes before and after the minutes were completed, and other things. So that's really what my suggestion was, and the team's suggestion when we visited.
Yes. And that is what we're attempting to do. That is why we have the relationship improvement building going on right now.
Right.
All right, thank you.
That was a great accomplishment this week.
Yes.
So
Thank you very much, Gary. Thank you.
Once again, Assalamu alaikum. Peace be unto you. Good evening, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We stand before you to talk about the Gambia story. But I can tell you, it's comforting. We came to Jamaica with a basket of problems, and we're happy to say that we're going back with the solution, right? So a very big thank you to SEMCA for organizing this timely and relevant workshop, to the World Bank and Gary and the team for giving us the opportunity to be here, to Jamaica for giving us the Caribbean experience for the first time. It's our first time in the Caribbean. To all of you for fertilizing our ideas and thoughts. And really, it's been a wonderful experience being here and participating. Like I said, it's about solutions, and we're here. We're happy to say that we think we have at least, not perfect tool, but we have something to take back and start implementing, which is a very, very, very useful thing. So just by way of background, You may recall the last presentation. Can you go to the next slide? On Monday, we were here, and I'm sure you sitting there were thinking, man, these people have a lot of issues to deal with, right? You name it, from governance issues, fiscal risk, issues of resource constraints, and capacity issues. So the question is, where do we start? And where do we start, really? Comes back to one thing. We need information, like Gary's last intervention pointed to that. Information is key. Because what happened before now? I mean, can you go to the next slide? Next slide. The key lessons, but let's get a background on this. Okay, the background is this: in Gambia before now, SOEs, in fact, has been in existence as far as I can remember, right? In my young life or old life, I like to think I'm old, right? But they've been in existence for as long as I can remember, and there's never been a specialized unit dealing with these SOEs in Gambia until now, right? And when I say now, it means 2 months ago. I mean a month or almost 2 months ago, when this SOE portfolio is moved to my directorate. Before that, it was with housed with the PFM unit, the Public Financial Management Unit, and it wasn't a priority for them. So it's just one of the things they have to do when IMF comes and asks for data, and they rush to the SOEs and get some information to appease the IMF, right? So you can appreciate what we're talking about here. So the first lesson, the issue of value creation, like Ruben highlighted in day one. It's about value creation. Now, and when I stood before you right now, the first thing I said was, from our perspective, coming here, we've derived a lot of value, and we're going to take that back. When it comes to SOEs, and when we go back, one of the first things that we try, the good thing is we can implement, right? When we go back, we can implement up, and I'm making a promise, a commitment. It's not a political promise. It's just a commitment to say that Gary and the team, we mean business, and I forget to, when I was saying thank you, I forgot to mention our mentor. Bernard. Bernard. No, the issue is I was trying to say thank you in French, but I forget what it means. Because Bernard is a French name, right? Merci, Bernard. Merci. Yeah. Yes, value creation. Now, the other issue, important lesson is, it's very important to separate for government to separate its interests, the three key interests what we've been discussing all week. Issues of fiscal, regulatory, and policy for efficiency. Now, the issue of arrangements. I just told you that before now we don't have formal arrangements and all whatnot. And so what you find is what is happening in our jurisdiction is some SOEs will connect themselves directly to the office of the president because there is no clear and consistent policy and legal framework that talks about this. We had what is called the Public Enterprise Act, but that is outdated as far back as 1990, when some of us were not born, right? So this is where we are. A clear SOE mandate is very, very important. Adopting and complying with the OC. In fact, I'm going to admit that before I get to this room, I wasn't aware of the OECD governance principles for SOEs. It wasn't something that if it crossed my mind or whatever, it wasn't important to me. SOE was not part of what I do, so this is just one of the lessons that we're learning, and we hope when we go back, we will implement them and effectively. Now, the issue of again, we mentioned information is about, if you want to intervene and do it right, you need information. It has to be based on data. So risk has been discussed extensively here. As always, cannot be eliminated, but can be reduced. SOEs should be subjected to the same standards as private sector. That is a very, very important lesson, particularly for their commercial activities. We learned from Australia that, and Jamaica alluded to this, that they also do it that. Maybe that's one thing that we're going back, what we can also do to separate the commercial from the non-commercial activities and see what can be done. What is commercial, you subject them to private sector standards and practices. At the heart of the matter, ladies and gentlemen, is what? Is people. It's comforting, like I said, that everyone that presented, and even in the discussions, keep saying that, oh, by the way, we just learned that we all have the same issues, right? We just at a different stage of our developments. So, that's not supposed to be a surprise, because at the end of the day, it's about people. We are all the same people, huh? Somewhere in other places, but it comes down to people. So what is important is we get the right people in place, people that are fit, that are proper, that are ethical, and they're professional, if we're going to get our SOE sagas corrected. So on the countries that we've learned from, these are just a few. You have Jamaica, Mauritius, Trinidad, Chile, of course, from Hugo, Robin, Colombia, and our friend from Australia. So this is just to name a few. Ladies and gentlemen, let me allow my colleague to now take you through what we intend to do in terms of implementing the actions. My grandmother used to tell me, if you know where you come from, you will know where you're going. So I've just told you where we come from. She will tell you where we're going. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'll just take you through